Okay, it is 3 minutes after 6, and we're going to call the Government Operations and Ordinances Committee to order. Present are Councilors Bolduc, Councilor Bounds, and myself, Councilor Doyle, and we are here to review the Chapter 167 noise and Chapter 161 licensing as it pertains to outdoor sound equipment and just the noise ordinance in general. So, we've been given proposed changes by the planning board, by the planning department. And do I need to read these in, or do we just go with what we have?
Just go with discussion for right now. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up for discussion. Does anybody have any thoughts, plans, ideas?
Do you want me to give you a little bit of background before we jump into that?
Please.
Sure.
Please, sorry.
So after our last committee meeting, we reached out to a good handful of communities who to look at their noise ordinances. We try to pick communities that may have some similarities to what we have here in Laconia. So Hampton being another resort area with outdoor things. Portsmouth having a lot of infill and residential apartments, second, third floor above some first floor buildings, some outdoor courtyards and such. We looked at Manchester and Bedford as well, and there was at least one more that's escaping me right now, but we tried to look at a few of them to do this. We looked at it with members of the licensing board. I was involved, police department, so it was more than just planning staff looking at it. We talked about the licensing, the enforcement, the response to it, and came up with a couple of recommendations for you to consider, both in Chapter 161, which is the licensing, and Chapter 167, which is the noise. So if we start with the 161, the licensing, the two significant changes start on paragraph 161-4 under outdoor sound equipment and loudspeakers. And the major change here is that it would allow the outdoor sound equipment loudspeakers to go until 10 o'clock on the Sunday through Thursday period, where they're currently allowed to 9 o'clock right now, and the 11 p.m. Hours still on Friday and Saturday. This doesn't change the requirement that any establishment or somebody with a speaker still needs to more or less contain the noise within their property. Just because the hours go to that point doesn't give them free rein to just blow the sound out through the neighborhood. The second change also continues on 161-4, and this talks about any weekend where there is a federally recognized holiday, and again, dealing with outdoor loudspeakers. Realistically, we think this would apply to Memorial Day, Labor Day, Columbus Day, maybe a little late in the season, but Columbus Day would apply. And also if 4th of July fell either with a legal holiday, was on the Friday or Monday, and it created the long weekend. Under that scenario, the holiday night, if you will, which in most cases would be on the Sunday, but occasionally for the 4th of July, the holiday could be on Friday, which would count Thursday night kind of as the Sunday. Those potentially 4 holiday weekends, the extra holiday day would be treated as a Friday or Saturday night, meaning the loudspeaker go to 11 as opposed to 10. If you recall, we had the request from the Margate for a Memorial Day weekend event where they were doing something Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and the Sunday hours would have required them to stop the outdoor loudspeakers early. Under this proposal, would treat that holiday extra weekend day, in this case that Sunday night, would have been treated as a Friday or Saturday in this example, and they'd be allowed to go to 11. So those are the two changes that we've brought forward for your discussion and public input, your input, under the licensing. If we look at Chapter 167 on the noise, I'm going to start on 167-2, paragraph B. This talks about, again, the highlighted is the area that's changed. So it says a violation is said to have occurred when noise is plainly audible within 50 feet, meaning 50 feet outside of the border of the property. And this is language that's similar to Portsmouth, Manchester, and Nashua. So plainly audible within 50 feet of a property line of the offending property as determined by the police. And they're putting emphasis on by saying particularly between the hours of 11 p.m. to to 7 p.m. Friday and Saturday, and 10 p.m., 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. on Friday and Saturday, and 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sunday through Thursday. So again, this is trying to match it up with the outdoor loudspeaker ordinance as to the times that we're indicating should be quieter times, if you will. And then we've added a paragraph C, which kind of just ties into maybe some street noise or nuisance, if you will. I've heard from, this language came from Portsmouth, and in Portsmouth, sometimes when a band stops playing or a bar gives last call and people kind of empty out into the street, sometimes there can be groups that maybe are a little bit overly loud as they're walking back to their apartments or wherever they may have parked, type of thing. So this isn't tied so much to a property owner or a business creating the noise. This would be groups of people who may just be, as we put there, yelling, shouting, hooting, whistling, singing in public. In other words, a little over-exuberant for the time of day, and again, those hours of 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then, under 167.3, we've talked about that there are options that establishments do have to comply with noise requirements. There are abatement techniques to mitigate the sound that's created, and with technology today, there are, again, options for people to look at in order to achieve compliance. And we did also update, and I'm missing it, it might be under the loudspeakers again, I apologize. We added, I think, computers and telephones as items that could create noise, where before I think it was just talking about, I don't know, it's just two little words. It talked about kinds of things that could make noise, meaning stereos or radios or that type of stuff. In this day and age, a lot of people are using either laptop computers or cell phones to generate music through it. So we just added those two as technology has changed, and I'll identify where those are for you once I run across them. So that is the gist of what we brought forward. It's not substantial from our opinion, but we think it does address a couple of the issues and still try to strike that balance.
Is that on page 161.6 up above? Is that the one?
161.6.
Well, 161.4 is right on top of the page.
Yeah, it should be highlighted, it's just not jumping
Yeah,
out.
it's
at me.
highlighted here.
161.4. Yeah, I'm not seeing it. It's basically, we'd added two words.
It's
but-
not highlighted?
Yeah, that part is.
Oh, okay. He's not the, okay, not,
That's the only highlighted thing in the whole
Yeah.
document.
Let me identify, maybe that part just missed the highlighting. Again, it was only two words, but basically it added the word telephones and computers to
I
the
read that.
definition.
I read that here somewhere.
So I don't want to get us hung up on that because that's relatively minor in the grand scheme of things, but those are the items that we brought forward for your consideration and your input and public input.
okay. You want to start? Okay, Councilor Bounds?
Yeah, I brought the wrong file. Clever me.
It's okay.
There was some talk about a method to allow an owner or a nightclub or a motel for some method to get an exception to these rules that would be fairly quick and user-friendly, that would provide safeguards that some of the issues that we had when the Margate came before us would be addressed, like noise across the water and all of that stuff. Is that still in place? Can we still do that with these amendments? Is there still a vehicle for a business in the Weirs or anywhere, for that matter, to come before the licensing board and ask for an exception to the particular curfew or the particular timeframes. Like we want to run, a party from till 12:30, which I think was the Marguerite's request. Is that still available?
There's nothing on the books right now that allows the licensing board to grant that exception, and that's why those people need to come before the city council. Similar to the licensing board wouldn't have the authority to waive vendor fees, for instance. That's a legislative body decision. You certainly could put it in there and grant some authority to the licensing board to do that. This does not present anything at this point.
Wouldn't it make sense to make it in terms of noise, and the issues with sound and noise, the issues we're addressing here, wouldn't it make sense to give the party a forum before the licensing board, subject to review by the council if that's necessary? But it seems to me that the council, in the first instance, doesn't necessarily have to be the body that hears the request for an exception to the ordinance, and then it can go before the licensing board, as many others matters do, and they can make a hands-on determination about what that is, and then either make a recommendation that will either bind us or for our review or something like that. I think that was part of the discussion that we had when we were discussing this in the first instance.
We certainly can do that, or you could even talk about put together some parameters and authorize, me as city manager to make that determination. I'm a little bit concerned maybe about putting a volunteer who serves on the licensing board, and again, two of them are city staff, but one is a volunteer. I'm worried about putting someone maybe in a political hotbed with either having to accept or reject when they're serving more or less, or not more or less, definitely as a volunteer role of maybe having them be in a little bit more of an awkward situation than they may choose to be in their reviews, in their either approval or denials. But it certainly could maybe be something with, a licensing board recommendation with, final review by city manager, so that at least, if anything negative were to happen about it, I get the calls at that point, which I don't mind taking.
Are you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable with that, because what I would do then is I would say, we've had an administrative request, I'm letting you know, as I would do sometimes in group emails to the council, just so you are aware, based on these parameters, we've agreed to X, and we'll monitor it and report back to you if we had any situations. So I'm perfectly fine with putting some language in there that would allow that type of process to occur, so that it doesn't,
It just seems to me that a process like that would facilitate the whole process request and make it easier or smoother. I don't want to say easier. You don't make the exception easier, but you make the process
It would
a
streamline.
little
Streamline the
smoother and
process,
streamlined to get them to their end point, either a yes or a no.
so it'd be two-tiered. It'd have to come out of the licensing board as a recommendation and then come for administrative approval. And then if the licensing board did reject for whatever reason, that applicant would always have the ability to come here before the city council and make their request if they were denied. So I think that's certainly a workable solution if the council is looking to support that.
Well, that makes sense to me, but
Well, I just, we usually make the last decision. And if we don't have that come to us, I don't know how that's going to work.
And
Okay.
again,
But you would be giving us the opportunity to make that decision, basically, to give input.
Not if he has to do it
no,
right then.
if I were to approve it administratively, then that would be what I would be charged with doing, and I would kind of give you the background as to, this is a decision that I've made based on the following criteria or input. And again, if something bad came of it, then, it's on me. I think what Councilor Bounds is trying to say is to avoid the process of getting, too long-winded or too convoluted and people coming from something that may be relatively routine, having to jump through a lot of hoops.
At that point, could you say, I'm sorry, but I can't make that decision, or to have to go to the city council?
I think either if I rejected it and they wanted to, in essence, appeal the decision or bring it to this body, then they would have the right to do that, assuming that time was permitting. If there wasn't enough time before the next meeting, then if I denied it, in essence, they would be out of luck at that point.
I'm just concerned about us not making the decision, and then one of the ones is going to get the calls and say, hey, what the hell are you guys doing?
Understood.
Once we make the decision, that's over with. They know that it's been, voted on by six councilors.
And that certainly was within your purview to continue to do that.
Yeah. But the way you're talking now is you still could have the last word, and if something happened, we would get the call saying, why the heck did you do that for?
And I would certainly step up and say it was my decision and respond to those calls for you. But I understand your point, Counselor, yes.
I mean, we do that in a whole host of situations. This process isn't new in terms of any other myriad situations. It's new to the noise ordinance and those licensing considerations.
And that's when they complain, is that the noise.
Well,
Let's not
I understand what you're saying, yeah.
let's not get hung up on that particular aspect of it. I think what we need to do is go forward and try to figure out the mechanics of how loud or how it's going to be policed or how it's going to be read as to who's going to give that final say. So that can be added at a later point. I mean, I don't see that we're going to solve this or have a decision tonight. I think we need additional public input. I think we need input from a lot of businesses that are affected by it, but I think we need to start somewhere. I know when I was looking through this, I was thinking that we really need more, a little bit more put on the planning department and maybe code enforcement as to before occupancy permits are issued, that maybe there needs to be a certain amount of soundproofing put into a building, before they can open up their business, just so that we don't have an after-the-fact issue of something being too loud, to try to contain the noise before it ever becomes a problem. There's, I know that as I pass this out from New York City's codes, one thing that's so funny, or an interesting comment that they have here, is that the best way to reduce noise disturbances is to encourage businesses to change any offending operational practices. Getting the offending business to come into compliance can be a challenge because compliance may include physically changing a business's operation or modifying sound equipment. But I just...
Where are you reading that?
That's on page 5, where it talks about music from bars and restaurants. It's because I think that we're just, as I've said in the past, this is not just going to affect the Weirs. This is going to affect all of Laconia, whatever decision we make.
Oh, I know.
And so we need to make sure that we not lock ourselves into just the Weirs with just hotels or motels being affected, but it can also be residential areas if we end up with the bars or nightclubs in the downtown area. They're going to be affected by the noise too.
This would cover the whole city,
It
right?
would, but I just want to make sure that we ourselves don't think that it's only applying to one area, because
no.
it's going to apply
The
to the whole city. I think there needs to be something in there for, I see that, in the noise ordinance, there is a, wherever I am, where it talks about the violations and penalties, but I think that maybe we need to, maybe a little bit more teeth needs to be put into that too, that if there's a continual violation, we need to think about that, because $250, well, maybe a business is having such a booming time that they could afford $250 a night to violate the ordinance. I'm sorry?
To overdo it?
To overdo it, yeah. I mean, if they may have just do $250 a night, maybe chump change if they're doing really well. So perhaps we need to look at, pulling an occupancy permit if there's too many violations. Put some teeth in it to make, if neighbors won't necessarily get along voluntarily, then maybe we need to make neighbors, force neighbors to do it. I know that there's got to be a balance there somewhere between the noise and everyone else. You know, because we all want to play together. I think we all want businesses to be viable. I certainly know that from a business standpoint, people that are involved in the tourism end of it want people up here, and if they want things for people to do, they want the nightclubs and bars and music venues. And I think that the music venues want people to have a place to stay so that they can in turn attract more people. So we've got to come up to a balance, but it's going to take a little bit more, I think, thought than what we have right here. But I think this is a good place to start. Good. Any?
That makes sense to me.
I just don't know how can we,
Well, we read right now
Sweeten this thing up.
that any violation of the provisions, there'll be a penalty imposed not to exceed the sum of $250. So not to exceed, maybe the first one, maybe we specify it, the first one is 100, the second one is 250, and each subsequent one in the same location is $500. I mean, what's a number that's
I
gonna-
don't know. I just know that it's, if it's possible, if somebody's somebody's business really takes off, $250 it may just be a cost of doing
oh, I
business.
can see adding that.
Yeah, and maybe a graduated
250 and
scale.
500.
Okay, so
And then that would cover the city, and I think they understand that if they're going to violate it, they're going to pay some money.
I guess, I don't know, I think there's a lot of other things, like I realize that, I guess the police are the ones that will be policing this, and I think we need to get them on board, that they're going to need to possibly train their officers, that it's, so that everybody's got the same parameters, everybody's working from the same page, so that it's not, so we can reduce some of the opinion, take some of the opinion out of it.
we have had one location that has given us challenges over a couple of year period that I'm aware of anyway. We had tried to do some maps and do a circle around it to show where 50 feet from the property line is. So if someone went to the location, they knew where to be standing, which was 50 feet away, to try to gauge the sound in order to do enforcement. In some cases in the past, I can tell you they've gone in and windows were open, but when the windows were shut, it was fine, and, could be an hour later, someone, maybe not the property owners, maybe a patron, opened the windows again. Sometimes, as the officers were there trying to determine the noise coming out from a certain establishment, you can hear a car going by that's got the stereo cranking and the bass booming, and is that throwing off as much sound as the site that the call came from? So it's not black and white, and unless we did full training and brought some kind of decibel readers, bought them and trained officers on the use, and determined that they could speak to and testify if needed that the sound definitely was coming from location X, I mean, that would be a significant investment in
And I don't-
resources to purchase and staff training to do it. And sometimes, calls do stack up, and does not minimizing a call for noise, but sometimes there's a call that takes priority over it. And I know that can be frustrating to people as
They're
well.
waiting, yeah.
Well, maybe what they have to do is, all of these people that rent out should have something, that last paragraph, somewhere in their business or where the people are staying, that they understand that if they violate it, this is what's going to happen.
Well, anybody who has an entertainment license from the city obviously is coming and applying for that on an annual basis, Mary? So, they're coming down, and if there are issues with a particular property, we certainly have the opportunity to address it with them again, but, the onus is on them to be, compliant, but we certainly have the opportunity on an annual basis for those that we know we have challenges with. The outdoor loudspeakers, when they fill out the application, that's a unique application, either for a one-time event or for, Thursday nights in the summertime type of thing. And again, it's right on the application that they're signing that they'll abide by, the ordinances that we have on the books.
We have a few members from the public. Do either of you wish to speak? Any suggestions, any verbiage? Anybody?
Hi, Joe Driscoll, 12 Maple Street. I find the discussion to be very interesting. One thing, I was very involved with probably the property you were mentioning, going through the planning process. So we go through the planning process. Certain restrictions were placed on that property as part of that process. We then inquired as to the enforcement mechanism, and we were told, you call the police. Well, you call the police, and they show up with the noise ordinance saying, I don't know anything about that planning stuff. This is the city ordinance, and this is what I care about. So I guess coordinating somehow with the planning process, whether there's a code enforcement aspect to it. One thing I did learn, and you can certainly check on this during that process, was the use of decibel meters, that they're going to be effective right at the source. You'll be able to tell what that thing is churning out. 100 feet away with other things going on, it's sort of lost in the noise quite a bit and does not really account for thumping bass, things like that. The issue of a passing car, now, to me, I'm reading this and I'm saying that's just another violation of the noise ordinance. It's not one supersedes the other. They both violated it. Would that be correct? Or plus, a car is a passing thing. Often with these presentations, it's constant for hours and hours and hours. I'll tell you what I told the planning board at the time, and we all did. There were members of the Weirs community there. I'm in business down there, in lodging business. I said, geez, I really don't care if they're juggling chainsaws in there till 4 o'clock in the morning. That's not the issue. The issue is that it's happening in my house. That's what it is. I'm being invaded by noise, and noise and light have been recognized as pollutants. There are techniques to make buildings contain the noise, which was all we were kind of pushing for. Say, hey, you want to do that? Great. I'm sure I got people who'd like to do that. I also have my families with little kids. I've had my windows buzzing. Years ago, I had somebody stick a mattress against the windows, this kind of thing, because the buildings are notoriously sonically transparent down there. So I don't know. It's got to be clear to us how to deal with the enforcement angle, because as we predicted at the time, you become kind of a nuisance call to the police with something like this, and I absolutely agree. And hopefully not. Hopefully for our officers, sound complaint is the most serious thing they got to deal with, but chances are it's not on their shift. There are more important things. Other things that sort of occur to me is like the outdoor loudspeaker. I mean, if you wanted to say, take a decibel reading at the speaker and say what they're allowed to have on that spot at that time, that might have some sort of validity to it. Is there any notification of abutters when somebody puts in for a outdoor loudspeaker? So all of a sudden, you can find out that 1 block over has just been approved for every Thursday through Sunday for 4 months. So now you're changing people's lives. And that really is the issue to me. I mean, I'm all for entertainment. I'd love to see more, love to see good venues, love to see them contain it properly within their four walls. If my business does things to disturb my neighbors, I want to know about it and I want to rectify it. I don't want to have a bad relationship. You don't really see that coming from some of the proprietors. Anyway, I just didn't know if there's any limits on how many outdoor loudspeaker presentations a given property can have in a season, a year, whether we need to or not. But I was also interested in that issue of a butter and other notification when such, particularly if the approval is not, I mean, there's got to be some sort of hearing, I would think. Anyway, just a couple of ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody else? Mr. St. Clair?
I just have a real quick question. On the 50 feet, the perimeter you're talking about, 50 feet, does that mean any sound past 50 feet, like my voice? Or would it be noise? What's something that's considered to be noise, like
I
loud?
think it's audible, isn't it? It's like if the lyrics of a song or
It should, it's, so, even on outdoor loudspeakers, someone had a deck, they needs to still contain the sound on their property, whether they just had it one night or they had a deck loudspeaker Thursday
what-
through Sunday. But it's anywhere 50 feet off the property if it's audible. If it's something, again, you can hear it clearly and know the words, or if it's a comedian or a
Music-
storyteller.
music with no noise?
Loud enough. If
I'm
it's
sorry,
loud
no
enough to
words?
recognize and do whatever, if it's more than 50 feet, that's considered audible 50 feet beyond the property. If it's just, a strain to hear and there's something there, but it's not truly discernible, it's not just you can hear there's a little bit of music going on, but you can't define what it is, then that not. But that's kind of the gray area that we struggle with, and that's what, when a police officer is responding, what they also struggle with.
So I didn't read, because I haven't got my glasses, but is that something you pulled from these other cities, that it's 50 feet? Like in Hampton Beach, or 50 feet in Portsmouth?
I
Or
believe so.
Hampton has it, and they're struggling with the enforcement, because I had reached out to them in addition to what they had done.
But it's the property line also, not
50 feet
just
from the
like the
property
building that's
line.
in, but the property line.
So it's not 50 feet, it's the property line?
It's 50
50
feet
feet
from
off
from
of
the
the
property
property.
Off the
line.
property line?
Yes.
Okay. Which for some people could be the edge of their building, literally.
Or for other people, could be hundreds of feet.
Right. Okay, I guess I'm just thinking how hard it would be to contain any sound past 50 feet.
And again, the language that is similar to what Portsmouth, Manchester, and Nashua have on the books is a violation is said to have occurred when the noise is plainly audible within 50 feet. So plainly audible is the
So decimal,
definition they're
a
using.
decimal thing wouldn't matter then.
It-
Wouldn't matter what the decimal reading
Some
says.
communities have talked about doing decibel readings, and the challenge with that is how much is impacted by a motorcycle going by.
Again, though, but again, if it's only 50 feet from the property level, it wouldn't matter if it's 100 decibels or 10 decibels. If you could hear it, then that would be a violation, correct?
Well, there's probably a meter reading, and I don't know what it is, but there's probably a number on that scale that would equate to plainly audible. So if an officer, rather than saying, well, in your discretion, was it plainly audible, you could probably parallel that to, did it hit a reading of 40 or something, might parallel to what would be determining as
So
to if
then
something's
they would
plainly
take it, because
audible.
I'm thinking what Councilor Brown said about the lake, because sound carries over a flat surface, especially if it's no wind or anything, quite a distance. I mean, you can literally hear people going by in their boats talking off the shore, more than 50 feet. I mean, it just carries. So I'm just thinking out loud here.
It was across Paugus Bay very clearly, all the way over to,
Oh, you can hear it.
Oh,
You-
yeah.
You can hear it. So that's why I wondered about the decimal, because then that puts a number on it. So you can say, this is what the violation is, and they broke that violation because it's higher than this decibel. The sound thing, I think, kind of opens that up to somebody's interpretation, period.
I don't know if you were here in the beginning, but we looked at Hampton, Portsmouth,
yeah, I
and
was.
there's not a great template out there to borrow. I think every community that is struggling with noise in this type of venue is struggling with the definition and the enforcement of it.
Well,
I mean, from,
I appreciate what Joe says, because Joe and I have some history with sound going back when I owned what is now the Paradise Beach Club. I had it before that, a couple times before that. So I know the give and take on this thing, and it's tough. And obviously, if business owners are going to try to accommodate their neighbors, but I think at some point it's almost impossible with sound, especially if you're the only venue that's got music at night and it's on even a Thursday night, and there's nothing else happening. That music will carry.
And
So-
and it's one thing if you're truly an inside venue and doors and windows stay shut and the air conditioning works, but we know there are places that have decks and patios, and when people are out there, they're hoping to hear the music, in most cases, if it's that type of establishment while they're out there. So it's,
Well, I'm very happy with it, with the changes you made with the times and that stuff. I think that's great.
Well, nothing's set in stone yet.
No, but
It's
your
proposed,
but
the
your
proposed changes.
your proposal, I think that's good. That's really good. But that's going to be a tough one on this other stuff. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. So, anyone else? No one else to speak? Did you want to say something? Okay. So where we go from here, I guess, I think we need more public input. I really think we need to encourage, and possibly now that we're actually looking at this and proposing to move forward, maybe we will get people that will actually come in and give us input so that we can write an ordinance that won't make everybody happy, but what is it? A true compromise makes everybody a little bit unhappy.
Well, how are you going to get more people? You're going to have a public hearing?
We will, I think we need to have a public hearing on this, yeah. And I think that's the
I
next
have a
step.
problem with that.
I think that's the next step. Do we need a motion to do that?
well, I just want to clarify what would be moving forward. So, I don't know if you want to take collectively what was brought before you to start the evening, if there were any objections there to that language being brought forward to the city council and asking them to refer to a public hearing, and then maybe take up a couple of items separately. Number one being the violation, if we want to maybe recommend it being the 100, 250, and then 500 for subsequent, maybe kind of take that as
should be
an
in
item,
there.
and we can kind of build this. And then the third one, following up on what Mr. Driscoll said, and I'll kind of paraphrase his words, that he doesn't mind his life being interrupted, on a one-night deal for, one night on a loudspeaker if something were to happen, but it's maybe every Thursday through Sunday type of thing. Maybe we could look to, on somebody who's looking for a recurring loudspeaker license, that it's not just a one-time event. Maybe we will place that somewhere on an agenda or a notice or on the website. So it's not going to be something, I don't think, where the city's going to be notifying all the butters necessarily, but maybe we can work towards something that says if somebody is looking for a season-long outdoor loudspeaker where there's going to be impact Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if that's the case, maybe there's an opportunity for those who are interested to come to the licensing board meeting and have the opportunity to offer public comment. So maybe there's something that we could,
The licensing board does not post their agenda.
we don't, but I'm saying, so if it was a one-shot deal, maybe we don't, but if it's something where someone's going to apply, they do post the agenda.
Post the detailed agenda of everything that's happening.
Oh, they do now?
So
Okay.
anybody who submitted in there, yeah, it's not to say that there couldn't be something last minute, or somebody showed up and didn't meet the agenda deadline and is asking for consideration that day, but we do, but maybe beyond there, we can make a point to highlight the ones that are looking for, a season-long impact from, Memorial Day to Labor Day, or whatever it might be,
Or
just so that.
possibly have them pay for an ad, like to notify people via an advertisement in the newspaper.
We could look
If
it up.
that's,
We
if
could.
they want to do it.
We could look at options, but again, I think there's going to be some responsibility on the part of the public to be trying to seek this information out, I don't think the onus is going to be on the city to be looking to all legal abutters and figure out the radius and do a mailing, and then do you do it certified? And that opens up a whole different set of issues. So I think there's got to be some responsibility on both parties maybe to try to let people know, and we can certainly work to that. So that's the other thing that I heard, maybe for those season-long applications. So I don't know if you want to kind of take those in that order and see where you have consensus.
I think that'll, are we okay with that? You want to include those? The both notification of abutters in some way or form to be included in this? Okay.
I'm not sure that it should be included. I think if we want to have a public hearing on the amendments that we've had, that maybe we ought to either propose the changes or modify them as we think is appropriate, pass them on to the city council for purposes of having a public hearing with respect to those changes to the ordinances. I think for the other changes, what might be a more efficient approach, I guess, is to just have another committee meeting on those specifics so we can hone down what we think we want to do with those two additional changes, because I think those might be premature to send to the city council right now. That's just my thought.
Well, I just meant for inclusion so that we can work on them.
Yeah.
So that when we go to a public hearing, we have something for people.
So we have something, we can
Right, to
put all
discuss.
that as part of the package.
You okay with that?
I don't have a problem with it, I just thought, we've discussed it tonight. When they come in for a permit, or whatever, are they given this type of
Yes.
information?
Yes.
They are, so, got to start making them be responsible for their own things, not...
We can.
So am I hearing the recommendation to ask the council to schedule the public hearing on would be for the changes that were highlighted in the shaded area, plus a restructured fine
All right.
proposal. And then I believe Councilor Bounds under 161-4, when we talk about the outdoor sound equipment or loudspeakers, I think we could find some language to go in there that speaks to recurring season-long licenses. An attempt shall be, not an attempt shall be, that the city will find an approach to post that someone is making an application for such and put it in a reasonable place. So whether that's an advertisement in a paper that is
Or on the
borne
news.
by the applicant, or it goes out of the newsletter, or it's posted online and with the agenda, and it's highlighted or bolded somehow in the agenda. We can find a couple of methods to try to make that happen.
I think that's a good start.
So I'm saying that, yes, that's what you want to bring
Yep.
forward, and we can make, you can
Yep.
make that out, and we can draft that and have that go to a first reading in 2 weeks, if that's the will of the council.
I think so. I think we can
Okay.
get this a good start. We can go from there and then get public input. Let's not limit public opinion, though, public input to what we have.
Sure.
I want to encourage
Yeah.
any other ideas.
And if there's significant changes, it just may require an additional
an
reading with
additional public hearing.
with revised language to it.
Yep, works for me.
The council would put together language that would determine the actual scope of the public hearing and what we were addressing, right?
We're actually changing, this would be ordinance changes, so we would have to
Yeah.
advertise with the proposed language changes
Yeah.
that are being brought forward. So that's why I was trying to define it a little closer tonight, because if we do advertise the public hearing, it's on an ordinance change, so it's not just come down and give us your input on something. It's saying, these are some changes that we are brought forth for consideration and ultimately could vote on. You could end up tabling them after public comment and revising them and come back with something completely different. But you are advertising that if the council decides this is the route they want to go, you're advertising that these are changes to these two ordinances that the city council is considering. Please come down and comment, and after you do the second reading, the council has the ability to vote on those changes at that point.
You okay with that?
Okay. I guess we are done. Do we need to make a motion on that? We can just go with it. Okay. All right, so I guess, is there any other business that needs to be discussed?
Not as far as I'm
Okay.
concerned.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. So moved by Counselor Bolduc and seconded by Counselor Bounds. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, guys.
I'm going to go get my file.
Oh, you go do that. Not at home.
No, it's at
Okay,
the
in the car.
office.
Oh, Jesus, you better run. Oh, you can't run. You better stumble. Okay, so,
Oh, it's right down at the office. So I'm just going to leave everything else here.
okay, you do that. I'll make sure nobody steals it. So then we go to the ladies' room, so all bets are off on that. Oh, no. Right there.
No, and
Hey, Dwight.
I'm really a rookie at this.
I'm
They're
still
meeting at
wheezing a
7
little
o'clock.
on, but I...
100, 250, 500. And then also some language about if someone does a season-long or recurring loudspeaker ordinance, a request for application, and saying they want to do it every Thursday night all summer long.
Yeah, I was up at Walmart the day before yesterday, and the
Engage the embutter.
We will,
the center hut.
yeah, but this could be a letter, we will advertise or post to make aware and let people know when they should be looking for it.
Yeah, that
But
bunch
it's not
that
going
we
to be
turned
like the
in.
true
Yeah.
required.
I'll let him know.
Well, Walmart must have given them permission.
Approvals and stuff. and the planning
They're on their property?
Well, they're on the sidewalk at the doors, where the doors are.
And a couple of approaches to notify people that this is up for discussion.
They were sent.
A letter.
For what? What are the weird actions? Oh, man. We did not receive the documentation from Parks, I'm guessing.
Trying to think.
It's for the parking lot,
I mean,
correct?
Roses has apartments upstairs. The old Roses, I don't know what
I
it's
don't know why
called
it's not
now.
under consent
Well,
motion.
maybe that's all one ownership in the building, and the owner says, hey, there's noise downstairs.
No,
If you
I
don't like
know,
it,
he saw
don't
it when I
do
sent it
it.
to Nancy.
Yeah, yeah, I'm trying to think of other places. I mean,
You can't add to the
Hampton,
agenda.
Mass.
What's that?
A lot of
Trying to add something to the agenda tonight. You can't do that.
We can put it on.
they were afraid that they were...
Kind of in not residential, but upstairs apartments.
Portsmouth's going through it with some of the courtyards and stuff right now, and like the Gaslight and the brewery and some of those that border along Market Square. That
What is the mayor?
But
Yeah.
there's some outdoor and then
Hello.
residents above, and it
I'm
could be
good.
a
How
building
are you?
close by, and all of a sudden they're,
Didn't they have a lot of trouble with the one,
Oh, no, you're gonna miss the lake, aren't you? I am.
the one that was built down by the mall?
I'm not sure why it was taken off.
When the mall was there?
oh, there used to be the old Lucas, and then turned into
that's
the
it.
Bananas
No,
or
that's
something.
what I understood. That's why,
Didn't
but
they
I...
have
I'll ask him.
Okay.
Did you want me to bring those books in?
Yeah, that was the
Something
third
got missed?
meat market.
Something got missed?
Yes.
Do you know why?
there.
For,
Oh,
yeah,
for
Joe and I
next
had a
year.
conversation.
Oh, I saw that.
They thought they were still on.
Okay. But I didn't know they sent you a letter, but I know you and I chatted.
The next meeting, it can
Working some background, so.
Okay.
Okay, so I pulled it administratively because I hadn't seen anything from you with some of the stuff the council had requested. And I knew it wasn't time sensitive because it wasn't going to occur till June, so I knew it wasn't like it was happening next week.
Yep.
Works.
But the council made some request of some background information that Joe and I chatted about 10 days ago.
What the heck's the mayor here?
He's coming.
I hope so.
Guidance.
He'll be here. Why, you don't want to have to do the job?
No, I just got
I have
something.
a
Sent
prompted
the agenda,
agenda.
and the mayor said, we'd like to see this. And I said, okay, Mr. Mayor. Only mayor can turn off the master.
Hi, Michael.
Absolutely.
So, Michael, I was looking for a correction.
Scott.
I guess there's not going to be a correction. The age of the trees,
The turkey's here, right?
where it said it was between 45 and 60. It says it's 45.
Apparently I missed that meeting, that whole maternity leave
Sent a letter,
thing.
but I know Joe
Howdy,
and I
howdy.
chatted about a week and a half ago when, well,
Okay, this is what you get for all those big books.
all right. Sorry about the confusion.
Thing's heavy.
Oh, do you have to stick around?
That capital
fund
That's
isn't
what
for
this-
that.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Kevin, though.
We just changed it. Yes, it is.
And that's what they're redoing?
We just did it so that it could include this stuff. And it's a non-capital reserve.
So these are the books you have in
And we have a
redone?
statutory requirement to preserve these. Come look at how pretty they are.
Yeah, so that's what you've been,
That we did one this year, 'cause that's
Yeah.
what I had money for.
$50-something thousand to do that?
Not just this, but an entire list. We have, literally, I have an entire shelf downstairs of books that have never been preserved.
So we gotta do that to every one of them?
Each one book gets split into two.
And how much is one book?
$3,000. Yeah, there's a lot of them.
So you're saying that to do them all is $50,000?
60, but yeah.
how far they go back?
The oldest ones we have.
1939 in there?
Yeah, no, not in this one. There's not. This is 1921 to 1929. But they take. They're actually going to be looking at some of the maps that Luke has too, and seeing CIP wise what Luke might be able to do with the maps. And I think he gave a list of different ones. We have, some of our books go back to 1850s.
Really?
Yeah, we've got some oldies downstairs. These are amazing. You want to come take a look at the ones that are down there, Bob? You can come take a look anytime. Some of the ones that haven't been done yet. But like these, you can see where that page was not able, there was so much
What do they do,
damage.
do they photograph them?
They do, I have them microfilmed as well.
Ah,
And they put them all on a disc for me, so that if there's any that are public records, we can put them out for public inspection so that they don't have to come in and flip through these books. They can actually get them, but the microfilms are required to be stored off-site from where the
Where do we
originals are.
store that?
So we are going to send them down to the state archive, where they'll be stored there, so that if for some reason anything happens to our originals anywhere, the state has the microfilms of everything.
do you have to pay to have that stored down there?
When they did the archive building, the state, part of the grant was to do that.
Told him we're here.
I did.
I told him we were here, but he didn't.
Do you have that sheet?
He's been telling me for 2 weeks, he's not gonna be here, he's not gonna be here, he's not gonna be here.
I have it on my computer probably.
decided to
We didn't put it with the non-capital reserve request.
We did over 3,000 miles in 2 weeks, that was enough.
I know what you tell me,
I'll have to go sign on, but I can do it.
Somebody must have a sore rear end.
I think you did.
Towards the last day, it was beginning to get sore.
If you emailed it, you should have it.
Here he comes.
Then you gotta print it out.
Nice looking rig.
It's really nice.
Big box.
It's an 03. I got probably
It's nice how the
Probably
trailer
20,
matches.
26 into it.
Well, yeah, we started the shelter.
Now,
Including the trailer.
yeah.
This is the vital records request that's on, so this is the one volume that we've got
Don't you want to
done,
replace?
just so you could see it. So this was all, every
How
page
does
here.
that now in capital reserve fund get on books now? I thought that was for building repairs and furnaces and windows.
You just adjusted it 2 weeks ago, and we talked about this during the budget time, and we said city assets,
He
and
was
we
waiting
raised
for
the dollar
this.
threshold. And I told you during
was
budget
waiting
time it
for
was
this.
coming. So this is from
There's
19...
nothing wrong with those.
No, this was already pulled out.
Oh, I see.
This is
Okay.
one that we've gotten done.
Oh,
It's
this
been
is-
sent
yeah,
away.
that's
Each page
beautiful.
was pulled out. It was put in an acid thing to clean up. It took the water stains out best it could.
Are these the original papers
These are the
here?
original ones.
original. Look at the
They're all
handwriting,
individually
huh?
sealed, so you can't slide them out, but you can pop the whole plastic sleeve out if somebody needs to photocopy
Yeah,
or something.
yeah.
So before
And we've got
this,
how many books?
it's like 20 of them to it, but
20?
they're all handwritten. These are all the records
They have
and
beautiful
stuff.
handwriting.
But this is, I mean, so you can see where they were all taped and bound and everything into it, but this, we're in much worse shape. We got some that are like, you don't even let people touch them anymore because they're But this one now they can
Yeah.
look at and do, so this was the request for, look, he's going right to H.
Yeah, just curious.
There might be some Hamels in there, you never know. 1858 is
So
the oldest stuff we
this is
have.
one book that was about $2,000 to get one book done, and we've got 20 or so volumes to get done.
What year
So
was
that's
this
the
one?
request.
There is no
That's
Hamels.
on 1921 to 1929 births only.
Should
Not
be.
a she in there.
So we thought you'd
be.
bring
Which
you
guy,
the one that we did, so you can see what we
Yeah.
get. But every page was removed and done in whatever to get the acid out, to get
I
the water
imagine
stains
they must, some of
cleaned
them
up.
must have really been
Oh,
fragile.
That was,
huh?
we got some
This
worse
is not
books
actually
than that, so,
public
yeah.
information, so.
How are you? Hi. Supposed to be doing something with Tom.
He just told me as he walked in all the time.
Pretty, isn't
before
it?
he-
It is.
Plunge.
Nice.
It's Mylar, encapsulated.
Mary?
Yeah, I think we did last year, just walk over there and
agenda.
welcome Tom to the, come on up and do the photocopy.
Well, I heard the math.
No, they were missing follow-up documentation that you guys asked for, and they didn't get it to us in time, so
We
I
asked
told
for them to bring
financial statements so that they make, yeah. I remember
and
that
on
last year you asked
not
for
what they
that.
make, but where it goes.
But yes, I remember you asked them last year for that as
Yes,
well.
right.
Because
Yeah.
I'm hearing they're doing
I want him to tell you without going to the.
I'm gonna leave this right back here in case anybody else wants to take a peek at it.
scholarships.
That's really
Why should they
nifty.
do scholarships? Parking money.
Good evening. I'm good.
guy
How
over
are
there
you?
next
Yes, I don't know where he came from.
Drifted in on the bike.
Must have got tired
You weren't
of,
gonna be here tonight.
tired of sitting on his seat.
We did what we wanted to do.
Came home.
I gotta get out of jail.
How was your golf game?
I don't know if I'd come.
I heard everybody goes out, play golf.
It was fun. Oh my God. Laconia Country Club.
Airport manager. Granite State Airport manager. Half a Concord took the day off.
Oh, no, really?
DOT, all the DOT officials and all that stuff. Yes, no.
That's okay. I saw that.
We gotta wait for David, he's out walking the streets. All right, maybe he drove, I don't know.
Put that up
There, did you get your book back? Okay, all right.
work part-time.
I brought up, we had one,
Real quick.
we had one book restored that's on your agenda for tonight.
Now working.
They'll hang around here.
I got some-
I was going
This guy, who the hell is this?
It is a gorgeous book when they're done with it.
He wants to put a damn walking trail around.
Oh, he's a guy that shows up every other meeting.
So people to bunk out there, it's a different day, all the doors.
He's come to a couple meetings.
I hope you guys don't do
No
anything.
one's paid any attention to him.
They're beautiful,
You know,
right?
there's,
Who does
Just say
this
enough
work?
on the mantra.
I think, what, she showed up at
So that's an
something else.
example of one
I don't know if you
about
noticed this.
$2,000. And
This
this
is
is
back
required by state law.
temporary,
We have to
no
keep the
bowling
hard copy.
area.
I'm a big believer in the paper.
We can put it digital and stuff. So anyway, so that, we wanted to let you see an
In
example.
addition to that, we also get a
A
microfilm,
microfiche?
which we'll send down to the state archives for safekeeping, so if anything happens to ours,
That.
they'll have it, and then I keep a digital copy
Oh, the
here.
dogs were whimpering and whining.
We get them back
Go out.
then.
She
Good
goes,
deal.
Got the turkey here.
Huh? Yeah.
okay.
95.
Time you forget,
They have 1 minute.
1 minute.
1 minute.
We don't know, well, we don't know if he tripped over the dog or tripped because he was on soft and slipped or, but he,
So he's gonna
my
be
husband was taken because he hit the
too bad.
slip
What?
and must have spun around and he slammed his head against the corner of the dresser. Ended up
I've been
cutting
wondering.
through.
Jeez, I thought I had something to get me
Cutting
there. I didn't
through,
see you there.
Cutting through his ear, all the way through. They had to do that. This was a couple weeks ago. He got a minor concussion from
Henry called me this
Hi, Eva.
afternoon.
And all
Yeah,
the times
he's
we've
got
gone to the hospital, they always ask about domestic violence. The one time he was supposed to be bloody.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The hour is 7 o'clock, and as mayor, I hereby call to order the city council meeting for the city of Laconia scheduled for September 14th, 2015. As always, we will begin our meeting tonight with a salute to our American flag. Please rise and join Councilor Ava Doyle in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the record, I will note that the minutes of tonight's meeting are being taken by City Clerk Mary Reynolds, and I would ask her to please call the roll.
Counselor Doyle.
Here.
Counselor Bounds.
Here.
Counselor Bear.
Present.
Counselor Hamel.
Present.
Counselor Baldwin.
Here.
Presiding Mayor Edward Engel.
Present. Let the record show that 5 councilors are present this evening, and we have established a quorum. Also note for the record that the council is joined at the head table tonight by City Manager Scott Myers and City Finance Director Donna Whitteman. First order of regular business is the minutes of our last meeting, which occurred on August 24th. Draft minutes were distributed to the council on August 22nd. No corrections were received.
I don't think they would distribute
can't
it
have
on
it.
No, I
August
don't think they
22nd.
were in front of the meeting.
I'm sorry,
You said August 22nd.
27th.
Oh,
Sorry,
27th.
did I say
All right.
22nd?
Yes.
I'm sorry. They were distributed on August 27th.
I
If
move-
there are no corrections to offer at this point in time, I will presume that the minutes are accepted as distributed. Counselor Baldock?
I'll make the motion to accept them.
We changed that at our last meeting.
Right.
Under the new parliamentary rules, we don't need to pass a motion.
All right.
They will be accepted by declaration unless there are changes. Consent and action calendar. In your package, you have an application from the Salvation Army for their annual Turkey Plunge fundraiser, and they're requesting to use Opeechee Cove Beach, the park house and parking lot on Saturday, October 31st, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. That's earlier than, the date is earlier than previous years, I believe. So moving it up in the calendar some. Motion would be in order to approve this request.
So move.
Moved by Counselor Bolduc, seconded by Counselor Hamel. Any discussion of approving this request from the Salvation Army? All those in favor of approving the request, please raise a hand.
Aye.
5 affirmative votes, and the motion carries. And I notice we have a very special guest in the audience again tonight, so I'm going to ask Tom to come forward. This is Tom Turkey, who is the spokes turkey, I guess we would call him or her. I get Tom, it must be a her or him. And we're going to take a picture here.
Great. Thank you so much.
Get the plunger.
Sorry.
Go for his tail.
Just so intent on looking at the turkey.
It's been in the water long.
Yeah.
It's cold that time of the year, so they're all purple now.
Love it.
Tom, how are you? Good to see you.
This council's going to the birds.
This is not that emu that was lost over in Bow. Did you hear that?
Thank you so much. Okay, thanks for coming tonight. Good luck with your event. See you, Tom.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Good to see you.
Thank you.
They got her on the wrong
Never
end.
shy for a photo.
I know, and they're fully.
You second.
Yes.
I should have worn a wilder tie tonight to try to compete with Tom. I think that's a hard act to compete with. Okay, next up is citizen comments for matters not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in our audience tonight who would like to speak to council about a matter that is not anywhere on tonight's agenda? Mr. St. Clair.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a suggestion, and maybe the council can pass the suggestion on if you feel so desired, to do so, and this is with regards to the oak tree that has become a matter of being in the public's eye right now on Union Avenue, next to the strip mall there between Dairy Queen and Dunkin' Donuts. And there's, you may have seen the report in the paper about the tree expert that mentioned the asphalt there being bad for the roots of the tree. And at first I couldn't figure out where the asphalt was coming from, and then I saw that probably the planning board asked them to do this, but there's a bit of sidewalk maybe from here to here, and then there's the driveway and the rest of the sidewalk. And on the other side of the sidewalk is the exit for Dairy Queen. So what I would wish that would happen is that, not the curb cut could stay, but I wish that somebody would be instructed to remove the asphalt from there, because we know it's not good for the tree. That part of the sidewalk can still be a sidewalk without the asphalt. It'd be fine, because it's got the curb cut. It's not a heavily used sidewalk. The city doesn't plow it in the wintertime, because there's only sidewalk in front of Dairy Queen and Dunkin' Donuts in this mall right there. And with regards to, I know this may or may not come before the planning board, but certainly that can be made just as an entrance there and not an exit, and people can just exit out through the current exits they have there. But the health of that tree is very important. I haven't heard from anybody that thinks that tree is just a minor inconvenience to people. It's a beautiful tree. It's certainly a lot older than any of us in the city. And I hope that it's preserved, and I hope that the city can do its part by removing the asphalt that's on the sidewalk right there. And you keep the curb cut, still serves as a sidewalk. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes. Please give us your name and residence for the record, please.
Good evening, I'm Lisa Hazeltine. I'm a co-trustee of the Moynihan Family Trust, 95 Main Lady Cove Lane in Laconia. I'm a resident of Guilford, but I also am a property owner in Laconia. I'm here actually to support one of my neighbors that is actually on the agenda tonight under new business.
Hey, that's a different part of the agenda.
I know, but I just wanted to let you know that I will be doing the same thing, so I'm not sure if it was appropriate for me to tell you now, but I'll be sending a letter probably this week.
This has to do
Just
with
wanted to give you
lot
a heads up.
mergers.
Yes, at 95 Main Lady Cove Lane. Thank you.
Anyone else? Something that's not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we'll move on then. We have several interviews tonight. And for those of you who are in the audience who may or may not be familiar with our policy per council rules on interviews, we do not make appointments as a rule by rule on the same night that we do interviews. So we'll be interviewing several people tonight, and we would take appointment action on these appointments at our next meeting at the end of the month. And the applicants are not required to go to that second meeting, although they are certainly welcome to. Okay, I believe Library Board of Trustees, we have two people who have applied for alternate positions, and there are two alternate positions open. The first of which is Susan Hayes. Is Susan Hayes here tonight? No Susan Hayes. The next applicant is Josh Peltonovich. Josh, did I get that name right?
Pretty close.
Pretty close.
Yes.
Come forward, please. And
This side or this?
use that one if you would, and please give us your name and address, and tell us a little bit about yourself and why you would like to be appointed to the library board.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. My name's Josh Peltonovich. I recently just moved to Laconia. I live at 24 Guilford Avenue, Apartment 3. It's in Ward 2, next to the high school, I believe, is what I've been told. I got interested in this basically because I started taking political science courses at UMass while attending, as well as environmental science courses. I've never done this before, so I also just turned 30 this summer, and I felt that it was a very good time to get to be proactive and be engaged in my community and to do something that potentially might have a change and might better things for someone else, maybe even myself, who knows. As far as the actual being qualified for the position, I don't know if I have that. I have the ability to want to learn, to work, to be dedicated. I can't say I've actually ever done anything like that, but I started out in journalism. I like to do research. I spend a vast amount of my free time at the library. They know me on a personal first-name basis. Not that they wouldn't in an area like this with a small community, but it's good, you know. Again, I've attended a few universities, the biggest being the University of Massachusetts. I currently do not have a degree from there, but I'm still working to get that degree. Financially, I just couldn't afford it being independent. It's expensive, you know, so I ended up moving up here. I knew a friend, and I'm taking classes at the community college, trying to save some money, work, and be a bigger impact to my community.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant?
Thank you for coming
Councilor
forward.
Hammond.
How long have you been up here, Josh?
About 7 months, roughly.
About 7 months?
Live here about 7 months, yep.
You plan on staying around, or?
I do. I will be taking classes at the college till at least next year. I noticed that it's a 3-year commitment. I was unaware of that, but I don't potentially see myself leaving within that amount of time frame either. I have some things that I'm working on personally. I don't have a license at the moment, so I'm trying to get that back, so that's a setback and things of that nature. But I do see myself being here for some time and wanting to be engaged.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I'm also up for the next position. Should I just stay up here?
He's up for conservation, too.
Councilor Bear.
This was an appointment that was first listed for 2 weeks ago, and he was not present at that one. So actually, this would have been the voting procedure, wouldn't it?
I think that would be true for Susan Hayes also.
Well, we rescheduled several interviews, as has been our
Rescheduled,
policy.
So rather, okay. Because I know they were on for last.
Yeah, occasionally people aren't able to make appointments, and we reschedule the interviews. Although I think as far as Mrs. Hayes or Ms. Hayes is concerned, this is multiple times, I think, isn't it? That
I
she
believe
has
it's at
not.
least 2, yes.
I think that should be.
So it would be up to the council as to whether or not we wanted to entertain another
I would say no.
attempt at that, and I think there would probably be a consensus that we would say no.
Yeah.
On this one.
And I'm just wondering if it, in terms of this, if we might consider waiving the rule as to Mr. Peltonovich, is that how I pronounce it?
Peltonovich, but you're very close.
Peltonovich, and considering him along with the other appointments that we're going to be considering for these positions that have been before us. Thank you for taking an interest in Laconia and being young and wanting to go for it. Thanks.
Thank you for having me, you know. You got to
So-
start somewhere.
Any other questions about the library board application? Questions or comments? So don't go anywhere, because you're our next interviewee also.
It'll be easier this time now that I've done it, you know.
Mr. Peltonovich, did I get
You learn
that?
quick, don't you?
Yeah,
Peltonovich, is that how you pronounce
that's
it?
correct, yeah.
All right, I'm going to try to remember that. Has also applied for a regular position as a full member of the Conservation Commission, where we have 3 vacancies currently. So please tell us why you have made application to that board.
Well, I can't say again that I know if I have qualifications for this, but believing what it is, conservation, when I first started, before I started going back to college, I worked for 2 different groups that were environmentalist groups. One was Clean Water Action, and the other was Environment New Hampshire. And it was the work that I did with them, and I actually did some campaigning at the time for a presidential election and things of that nature, that really got me to get engaged, you know, go back to school. And I think anyone can agree that part of living in this state is the beauty of it. You know, if we didn't have these beautiful lakes and trees and things, then we wouldn't, you know, enjoy this as much as we do. And the conservation, I believe, of such, you know, said natural beauties is of high importance. And if that's what I'm assuming that is, I don't even know, to be honest, but that's, you know, what I assume that would be. And I think that is, you know, extremely crucial, because I've, you know, been on the forefront and gone door to door and talked to residents and seen how they care. And, you know, it's a big issue in this state, especially where we got to, you know, preserve what we have and save it for the future and our other generations, because if we don't, then what do we have left, you know?
Any questions of the applicant regarding the Conservation Commission position?
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate it.
I'm excused, I'm all set.
Unless you signed up for something else.
I didn't know I could do that many, so maybe next time. Thank you, guys. Have a wonderful evening.
Okay, I think the next thing up on the agenda is mayor's report, and I will be brief tonight. I wanted to call attention to the fact that festival season is alive and well in Laconia, and this past Saturday, we had the 14th annual, I believe, multicultural festival downtown, and we had perfect weather and a very large crowd, and a terrific number of vendors, including a wide variety of food vendors that gave people a chance to try all kinds of different cuisine, including, if my memory serves, there was an Argentinian booth, there was a Philippine food booth, there was I'm trying to think, there was something else exotic. There were 4 or 5 different, there's another nationality that escapes me at the moment, I'm sorry, as to what that food was, but quite a variety, and was down there myself for a few hours, and everyone was really seemed to be enjoying themselves, a very festive atmosphere, so that was good not to see, from a community building standpoint, not only good to see people out and about, but also getting together and engaging in conversation. And we have another opportunity coming up this coming Saturday when we have the second, not annual, because they did skip a year, but the second New Hampshire Coffee Festival is scheduled for right on Main Street itself, downtown, on Saturday, and I believe the hours this year are noon to 4, if I recall correctly. So that was a tremendous success 2 years ago when they did the first one in terms of the number of people, especially the number of people from out of town who showed up for that. So we're very much looking forward to that again, and I would encourage all, not just Laconia residents, but residents of the Lakes region to enjoy what will hopefully be another fine fall afternoon and come down to the Coffee Festival right there on Main Street. And then, of course, we're less than 2 months away now from the Pumpkin Festival that we've all been very much looking forward to. And I don't think anybody probably needs a reminder, but that's scheduled for Saturday, October 24th. I had the pleasure of listening to a recap of the logistics involved from Carmen Gifford at the Chamber of Commerce a couple of weeks ago, and the amount of detail that goes into organizing and pulling that off was truly dizzying and made me thankful that it's not me that's in charge. So we're very much looking forward to that, and just being able to pull off the logistics. If they just one little detail that's kind of stunned me, and I hadn't really thought of before, but they light these pumpkins. And, I mean, think about that. The world record is in the 30,000 range. I don't remember what it is exactly. But try to think about trying to light 30,000 pumpkins in a confined amount of time. I mean, that in itself is pretty mind-boggling about how they would do that and how they go about that. And I guess the cleanup afterwards is something to behold, really, too. And so I know we're all looking forward to that. Lastly, quickly on the Colonial Theater front, I would like to report that 2 major committees have been formed by the Belknap Economic Development Council, one dealing with fundraising. As you know, the somewhere between $1 million and $2 million needs to be raised privately over the next 12 to 18 months, and less than that now. So that committee has been formed, and then secondly, the planning committee has been formed, or a planning committee has been formed, and that is the committee that is charged with coming up with and working out the details of exactly what the scope of work will be and how much money will be spent on that. and Counselor Bounds and I are both serving on that particular committee. So we've already had 2 or 3 meetings, and the current task is to pick an architect and a construction manager. And that work is underway right now. The interviews are scheduled for next week, I think it is.
September 24th, I think.
So, yeah, is when the interviews are scheduled for that project. So hopefully by sometime in early October, we will have an architect and a construction manager on board.
What are we working under the auspices of the Belknap Economic Development as they're the owners?
Yes.
We're doing the developing,
Who's we're,
the city?
no. Counselor Bounds and I are simply
Oh.
participants on the
On
committee.
the committee, okay.
Yeah. I guess you could say we're representing the city's interests, and in Counselor Bounds' case, other interests as well.
Yes.
That's true.
Being our resident theater expert and whatnot, but, yeah, so we're,
Yeah.
I was specifically appointed to represent the city's interests, and Counselor Bounds has dual interests, I would say. So we'll be reporting from time to time on the progress of that project. Okay, citizens' request to comment on current agenda items. We're now at that time on the agenda when someone who wishes to address the council on any matter that is anywhere on tonight's agenda, either an item that has already been mentioned or one that's still to come. This is your opportunity to comment on, I know somebody who already jumped the gun, so we heard you. Anyone else like to comment on any item that is on tonight's agenda? Mr. St. Clair.
Not on there, but
I was just recently informed that you won't be talking about the U.S. Business Route 3 signs tonight, so since it is on the agenda, I just want to comment and hope that we're not still talking about this in January or February. It is, if you Google directions in the Laconia, it does say U.S. Business 3. And I am constantly giving directions to lost people in downtown Laconia who Google their way in and then look for the signs to find their way out. And so I understand there's some issues, but whatever. Please, thank you.
While you are here, let's bring the city manager into this, because I understand you will not be in town on the date of our next meeting.
I will not, nor will I be here.
Since this was your initiative to begin with,
No, it gives you more breathing time, though, or
Yeah.
somebody. Not till, not,
so would you like us to wait until you are going to be present?
if you feel it's needed, sure. I'll be, I don't want it delayed because of me.
Will you be here on October 13th? That's a Tuesday.
No.
So 12 and 14 is October 26th.
Yeah, I'm here then. But again, I don't want it to wait because of me, so we don't want all these lost people stumbling around.
Keep them here.
So
Keep them
let's
here.
ask the manager, when, from a public works standpoint, when will we be?
We can have it definitely done. It's my fault, it's been lagged a little bit. We've had a number of significant projects that Public Works has been wrapping up, and really just to
True.
throw this on. So I wanted to get kind of through that construction phase. There's no real objections, just the Public Works Director and I just want to go over and just take the map that planning produced, verify the locations, put together a cost estimate, and give you a little more information. But there's nothing the city is objecting to per se. We know that the Downtown TIF Advisory Board has pledged their support. It was just a matter of priorities and getting the bridge project kind of wrapped up in the area
Will that
up on Hospital
report be
Hill.
available for the October 28th meeting?
Yes, without a doubt.
I mean, not October
October
20th, I mean
26th,
September.
absolutely. Yep, I've got the note made already.
September.
So we can put this on the agenda for our next meeting.
We can do it for the next meeting if Mr. St.
Let's
Clair
do-
has no
let's do that
objections.
then.
Oh, I would have no objections at all.
Okay, we can definitely do
Because
that.
I know it's in good hands.
Yep.
So,
Thank you, sir.
all right, thank you very much.
You'll hear about it on CNN right after the meeting.
Undoubtedly.
Probably cover it live. Okay, anyone else? Anything that is on tonight's agenda? Okay, committee reports. I know Government Operations and Ordinances had a meeting tonight and would look for a report from Counselor Doyle.
We met and went over some tentative proposed revisions to the noise ordinance and the licensing ordinances as they pertain to outdoor sound and loudspeakers. and are taking what was proposed and written up. We've made a few additions to that, and we are going to be sending that to get written up, and we would like to request that we go to a public hearing at the next meeting, if we could. We'd like to schedule that.
So the request would be to have the council approve placing this on the agenda for 2 weeks from tonight for a first reading with the proposed revised language, and then be scheduling the public hearing, which then we would be scheduling for the October 13th
Okay,
meeting
so
for
we
a
would
second reading.
introduce the details at our next meeting
Yeah,
and
sorry.
schedule a public hearing at our next meeting.
I get this whole
Not for the
scheduling
hearing
thing
to
wrong.
be at the next meeting, but
Correct.
it's the first meeting of
Be on the
October.
agenda for a first reading and for scheduling the public hearing.
Okay, is there any objection on council to that course of action? I think we have a consensus to do that.
Okay.
Very good. Anything else on committees?
Can I ask a
I always get
question on that,
Sure.
on the discussion? Since you shut down your meeting, I was thinking something about the 50-foot
Parameter. yeah.
parameter. There's a couple places that come to mind that have beachfront or waterside entertainment. So how would that work? I mean, that's just something to think of. This is right on the water.
That was discussed as to how
Places.
sound travels across the water.
Yeah. And
It's-
will that include marinas that have loud motors for boats that they can throttle up pretty good? I mean, that's there also. So, not trying to throw more stuff in, but it's just,
Well, this
that
is,
make noise.
this is also one of the reasons we're going to have the public hearing, is because we also want to get additional information that we maybe didn't think of.
Okay.
The 50-foot where that comes in, if I can, comes from whether, it could come from a boat docked in a marina, but it's more for a permanent establishment, not so much a boat starting up and pulling away and going out in the lake, because that could be similar to a car starting their engine or a motorcycle starting its engine and then driving away. This really is geared a little bit more towards either an establishment that has entertainment, or it could just be someone who has a lot of guests over and it's late at night and they've got a loud gathering going on, and noise, whether from a private stereo or whatever, is escaping the property and causing a nuisance.
Also, somebody brought up about the loudspeaker permitting, the ones that do it for the season or whatever. Why couldn't that be put on our website?
We did indicate that that was something we're going to make an effort to notice more. We do actually post the licensing boards, agendas are all available on the website. We actually put every agenda and the items of who's there is on the website, and we also link them all through our weekly newsletter. People can access them either place. So there are specific names there of somebody doing it. We're going to make a little extra effort for someone who's looking for a season-long, a recurring every Thursday through Saturday type of thing versus somebody who maybe is just doing a one-time thing. But as I brought up, there has to be some responsibility on the general public to want to look for these things. We're not going to be doing certified mailings or anything as a true abutter list like we would maybe on a planning board subdivision type of thing.
Yeah, I don't think you need to notify all the abutters, but I'm saying is, if a permit is granted, couldn't that be on our website saying, loudspeaker granted for the season for this establishment, so that people could look and say, okay, that's next door here or whatever?
We could. I think the person who was speaking was looking to be able to have a chance to come down and comment during the
Yep.
licensing board meeting to have their input before the license was granted necessarily. But we could keep a running list of those that are coming forward and those that have been granted, so there is a place to have as a resource.
Okay.
The word season, I don't think is the right word to use, because this applies to the entire city. When we have entertainment downtown, hopefully, and anywhere else in the city, it could be a year-round establishment, so we should probably not think of it as seasonal as it refers to the Weirs, but as it refers to the whole city.
That's a great point, and I think we do differentiate between indoor, and I guess the one that we were more focused on was the outdoor loudspeaker, which I guess technically somebody could have an outdoor entertainment in November and December and January, but it's probably less likely. but certainly a point to consider, because there is year-round entertainment. This was more focused on the outdoor loudspeaker, which I think we would agree you would find more from the Memorial Day to Columbus Day timeframe, but point taken, yes.
Okay.
Anyone else? Okay, how about liaison reports? Do we have any liaison reports tonight? None? Okay, we're on to the city manager's report. Mr. Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Included in your agenda packet for our first meeting of the month, you have the monthly economic development report, as well as the financial and operational trends report. On the economic development side, for July of 15, the unemployment numbers for Laconia, Belknap County, Concord, Manchester, and the state are all trending at approximately a 0.5% better or lower than they were in July of 14. So that's a positive trend that we've seen continue for a few months now. On the back page of the report, you also see our CPIU, Consumer Price Index Urban, the 12-month percent change, which is one of the variables that we use in our tax cap calculation. For the month of July, inflation ran at 0.2% according to that index. So 7 months through the year, we're running at a negative 0.1%. So that's telling us that inflation has basically been non-existent. Moving on to the financial and operational trends, at the very top is the second component of our tax cap calculation by charter. It's the net gain in construction value from our building permits. Again, the assessing year begins April 1st and runs through March 31st, as is set in state law. So for the period April 1st to August 31st, we're running $21.5 million, which is up about $3 million from same point a year ago, and it's up about $9 million from the same point 2 years ago. So we are continuing to see an uptick in some of the building permits and the growth of new construction, getting back to levels that it was pre the serious recession. So going back to 2005, 6, 7 levels is where we're starting to trend back to again. Last year, just to refresh you, our number for the complete year last year was a little over 29 million. I forget the exact amount, but 29 something. We definitely see the bulk of our building permits come in this time of year. They tend to trail off during the winter months for obvious reasons, and sometimes we get a little surge in March as we anticipate spring construction season. If you turn on to page 2, or the back of the first page, we're looking at the two largest revenue generators for the city toward the bottom, property tax collection and motor vehicle registration. Tax bills, again, we issue twice a year, so we're running at 95.5% collection through this year, through the July warrant, and you can see how that compares over the last 5 prior years, so we're trending very well there. Motor vehicle registrations, again, we're 2 months through the start of this fiscal year, so we have July and August in the books, and dollar-wise, we're trending slightly ahead of last year. We have budgeted a higher figure this year. You can see this year we budgeted $2.325 million in total revenue versus the budget last year, $2.175. So we're on track for the higher budgeted number, but again, we're only 2 months through the year. On the fourth page, we've got a new item that the council requested that we include, just as an FYI for you, and it's the middle of the page, is the pending grievances summary. So again, we need to be careful about what we identify and make sure we don't engage in any unfair labor tactics, but you can see date of union grievance, what union it was, what the issue was, and the status, if you will. There is a process that goes through where grievances are heard within the department level first. If the grievant does not satisfy with the action there, they have a certain time frame in which to appeal it to me as your city manager. I have a certain time in which to schedule a hearing, a certain time after that in which to respond to. Most of these fall in within a 10 business day window, so we're not talking major months. And then beyond there, there are still additional rights, including arbitration. So I've just given you a little snapshot of the 3 grievances that we have. Again, the cost, if we do incur any costs, sometimes this lags a little bit with some legal counsel on labor law. So those are the costs through July 31st, because sometimes in the billing cycles, things aren't always coming in on a weekly basis. So I don't necessarily have maybe all of August billings in at the time that we put this together for you. The impact fees are at the bottom of the page, so you can see we've got some money continuing to come in, I won't say every month, but more often than not now that impact fees, which were put into place a few years ago, I should describe what impact are. Impact fees are for new projects coming online that may have an impact on the infrastructure of the city and the ability to provide services. So if there's higher school enrollment by new development, it could impact infrastructure in the schools. If there's more housing development, it may impact the size of the fire department or response times, roads, parks, and those types of things. So we have several categories that have been set up. Projects that were already in the works when the impact fees were initiated were not subject to the impact fees, so it is only for new projects after about 2010, I believe, is when the impact fees, ballpark 2010, and the impact fees will get paid when they're issued a certificate of occupancy. So impact fees come in at the tail end of a project. But I would say at this point going forward, we ought to see somewhat of a regular contribution. Again, this month's wasn't great, wasn't a huge number, but $3,400 across school, police, fire, parks, roads, and library. And the total of those 6 categories collectively is $63,000 for that.
Now, those expire at some point. What's 6 years? Okay, so we're going to need to start spending some of them soon.
Yes, I think the earliest money just came in within the last 2 years, so we've still got 4 years to go with it. But you are absolutely correct that we do have a tracking system in place, because if we don't utilize the funds for their intended purpose, they need to be returned to the developer at the time. So we've got a system in place to be doing that.
Scott, on those fees, I think those were done, was it 5-6 years ago?
I think in around 2010, I don't know the exact date, but
First one received was 2011.
2011, okay.
The amount that we charge, is that something we should be looking at where 5-6 years have gone by, or are they adequate for now, or?
I believe, for my own, I'll give you my opinion and certainly open it up to other discussion. We are only right now assessing, I believe, 25% of what was approved because of a slow economy and what I still consider to be a fragile economy for some segments. So there are higher fees in, but when the council kind of kicked them off, being a down economic cycle, we're only collecting them at a 25% rate. At a future date, we can certainly have the discussion about collecting at 50% or some higher level, but from what I hear, things are better than they were a couple years ago, but I'm still not hearing that we're in a robust development, and my own personal feeling is we don't want to maybe add a little more cost, which might deter somebody from moving forward on a project.
Okay.
And then on the final page, we have the current balances in the expendable trust as well as the 3 TIF districts and the amount collected year-to-date for boat taxes. And again, the majority of the boat taxes will get paid in the April, May, June, and into July timeframe. So not a lot of boat tax money rolling in, probably from here for the rest of the year, for the calendar year. 2 other items to bring to the mayor and council's attention tonight. First one being we received a late request that did not make tonight's agenda to do a temporary traffic order for the annual homecoming parade. The homecoming parade is scheduled for September 25th. You do not meet again till the 28th. Recurring event, the same route, coming over the Main Street Bridge, up Beacon East, down Church Street to the high school. So I'm sharing that with you, but I will, unless I'm hearing objection, I will be authorizing that administratively. They just missed the deadline, and we certainly want to encourage homecoming. Second item to bring to your attention is that I am nominating Patrick Wood to fill a vacancy on the Laconia Housing Authority. He will be replacing an expiring term of Stephen Laurent, and I appreciate Stephen's service to the city. One of the things in speaking to the executive director, I usually consult with him. These are city manager appointments, but we try to look at the makeup of the board on how it's represented with various maybe professional backgrounds and approaches going to it. And in speaking with Dick Weaver, we felt this was a good choice, not only for the legal aspect, but also having a downtown representative for part of it, where we've got the Stafford House as well as the Union Avenue property right there in our downtown. So appreciate Mr. Attorney Wood for stepping up and offering, and for the service of Stephen Laurent. And I'll be happy to entertain any questions you may have.
Questions for the manager? Councilor Hamlin.
Well, it's more of a comment. I was just looking at the overtime report, and one of the areas, year-to-date overtime is almost doubled from the same time period as of last year, so I think we ought to keep an eye on that and see what's happening there.
Yeah, we always monitor overtime. Some of it could be to, the way holidays fell. Some of it could be vacation request. Some of it could be tied to someone out on an injury, in which case this shows the overtime, but there's workman's comp reimbursement coming in. So the only funds that any of these departments have to work with are the funds that you approved within the budget time, and that's what we work with.
Any other questions or comments about the manager's report? Councilor Bear?
Excuse me.
Did you have a comment?
No, sorry.
That's all right. Anyone else? Anyone have any objection to the manager approving the Laconia High School traffic order request? I'm assuming that's okay with everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to new business. The first item of new business tonight is the payment in lieu of taxes, or so-called pilot agreement regarding the Taylor community. Would note for the record that in our audience tonight, we welcome Mr. Bob Selig, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Taylor community, and Mr. Robert Smith, who is the Chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Taylor community. And to get this discussion started, I will recognize the city manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, what you do have before you is a renewal agreement for the payment in lieu of taxes that we refer to as a pilot between Taylor community and the city. This has a history going back to the 90s and perhaps earlier than that. Mr. Selig can correct me on that if I'm wrong. But basically, with pilots, an organization or an entity does not pay the regular property taxes on that for a number of reasons. Could be a nonprofit, could be a use that doesn't impact a lot of the services or the schools in the city and stuff. So that's kind of a background on why you would do a payment in lieu of taxes. In this particular situation, Mr. Selig and I have met a couple of times, and certainly we'll offer him the opportunity to comment if he likes. We've looked through, discussed a few concerns that he's raised, and probably the only major difference in what this agreement is versus the one that just recently expired is that this agreement, where 1/12 of the rent is paid to the city as a payment in lieu of taxes, is based on the actual rental rates of the various units versus what might be considered as a rack rate or a posted rate. And the reason being that some of the contracts for residents there go back quite a few years, and some contracts that were entered into a number of years ago are at a rate that's below what it would rent for someone new coming into it now. So the feeling was that in essence on some of the units there was payment of greater than 1/12, which was the benchmark to it. In real dollar terms, to put it to you, under the most recent terms, the payment was approximately $250,000. This would be about a $12,000 reduction in round numbers, so we're in a $238,000. But again, it's not set in stone. We get audited reports from the Taylor community that show the rates they're being charged, that show the occupancy levels. So it's based on today's number as a snapshot. It's about $12,000 less than what it was prior to that. When you put it in terms of how that equates to where all of that property is assessed, if they had been paying taxes, it equals the municipal and county portion approximately of our tax rate. So it's not, in essence, paying taxes on either the local portion of the school or the state portion of the school, which they're not impacting. They do bring a lot of betterments, a lot of enhancements to the community in terms of care that is provided at no cost. They do a number of cultural and entertainment events that are open to the public there. They have rooms up there that they open up frequently to nonprofits and for even city agencies to host trainings, and our departments have taken advantage. They've been a wonderful host. We think they're certainly a valuable partner in our community and a good resource. So that's the information that I have for you from the city's perspective. Legal counsel has reviewed this document as well.
And my understanding is that this renewal would be good for 10 years.
10 years. And again, the dollar amount would fluctuate based on the current rates, so there is an inflation index, to it as the numbers go up, and based on the occupancy. And again, we're coming out of a downturn in economy, and we would expect, going forward as the economy is strengthened and stuff.
So what's their payment then?
It's about $250,000.
$250,000. $250,000.
This says 150.
That was a minimum based on an original agreement going back a number of years ago, that it would never fall below $150,000.
Any questions about this agreement before we get a motion on the floor? Any? Okay, a motion would be in order to approve the payment in lieu of taxes renewal agreement with the Taylor community for a 10-year period, and authorize the city manager to sign the agreement on behalf of the city.
So moved.
By Councilor Bolduc. Is there a second? Councilor Hamel makes the second. Any discussion? All's in favor of approving the pilot agreement, please raise a hand. We have 5 votes in the affirmative. The motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for being good neighbors.
Thank you. Thank you.
Item number 2, non-capital reserve fund request. You have a memo from, to the city manager, a copy of a memo from the city manager, to the city manager from Mrs. Woodeman, regarding the need to restore and preserve vital records of the city, births, deaths, and marriages, et cetera, that date back as far as 1855. And for note for the record that 1855 was the year that the legislature created the township of Laconia. So this goes back to the very beginning. Although the city was incorporated in 1893, the township was incorporated first, different boundaries than we have today, in 1855. So we've got those records, and they're asking for an appropriation of $56,000 to affect that record preservation. Would you like to comment on, either one of you like to comment on this any further?
We brought this up during the budget process back in the spring, knowing it was going to be a significant expense, that we didn't have the dollars. It was also mentioned at the time that our request to you was to move $200,000 out of that one-time return of city funds from the Concord Co-op program into the non-capital reserve account, with the intention of bringing this item forward to you. And the council did a few weeks back also amend the allowable uses for the non-capital reserve account. As you recall, when it was established about 10 years ago, the threshold was $20,000, and it was for buildings and those types of assets. We did amend the use to expand it for city assets, including this, and we certainly think that our public records, number one, first and foremost, are a tremendous asset. Number two, there is requirement in state law to do that. And as you can see, by transferring that $200,000 you did into the non-cap reserve account, back during the budget. The current balance is around $347,000 there. And we did bring one volume and shared it with a few of you who were around before the meeting, but it's a beautiful, I don't know if Councilor Hamel, you can grab that and just maybe hold it up for the camera for a second, but this goes to the original books. This is a refurbished book, but the original books where a lot of the paper is brittle and falling apart. It's all cursive handwriting. It's all logged in both alphabetically and by date, and the pages get taken out and handled. They get put in an acid-free wash. They get repaired from any binder glue and watermarks. Each page individually gets encompassed and sealed inside a plastic sleeve, so the original document is there, but it can't be handled. The nice thing about these binders is the individual sleeves can be taken out so that somebody can photocopy, and along with that, we also get a microfiche copy of it as well that we have, and also we provide to Concord for part of the state records as well. So it's a nice combination, and I think that book you're holding there has birth records from 1921 to 29, and it was about $2,000 to do one volume like that. So we have 20 volumes, which are going to range from the 1,800 to 2,800, depending on the size, the number of pages, and that's the request for the figure before you this evening.
Are they still doing microfiche?
The state is, yes. But this will get all of our required historical records up to date and preserved in that manner.
Any questions or comments before we get a motion on the floor? Councilor
I
Bolduc.
just think it's important to keep those books in good condition because that's the history of the city, and very important.
Anyone else? Okay, a motion would be in order to approve the use of funds in the non-capital reserve account for the purpose of the restoration and preservation of vital records in an amount not to exceed $56,000.
So moved.
Moved by Councilor Bear, seconded by Councilor Bolduc. Any further discussion of this matter? All those in favor of approving this request, please raise a hand.
All right.
We have 5 affirmative votes, and the motion is approved. Item number 3 is first reading of a resolution relative to a request by the Laconia Police Department to accept a justice assistance grant in the amount of $14,641 with the city's share at $11,641, and request to schedule a public hearing on September 28, 2015 during the regular council meeting relative to acceptance of this grant. In accordance with the city charter, section 5:06, all appropriations after the budget has been approved for the fiscal year require a public hearing and a resolution to reaffirm the funds. Council Rule 27B requires that any resolution that will appropriate funding shall require 2 readings prior to adoption. You have that resolution in front of you. Mr. Myers, do you wish to comment on this further?
I think it's fairly straightforward. Again, it's a grant that we've applied for in conjunction with Belknap County, and this is for the purchase of urban patrol rifles that will allow our first responders to respond to any type of an active shooter, an active scene with the appropriate firepower, and this will allow all vehicles to have the appropriate rifles, in the hopes that we never use them, but that we're there and we can take appropriate action if needed.
So $3,000 will be kept by the Sheriff's Department, is that what's
Yeah, I think we applied for a
unspoken
joint grant where the total is the $14,641, of which the share that would be in our custody, so to speak, our control would be the $11,641.
here? Any questions or comments on this matter before we get a motion on the floor? Councilor Hamel.
Are these going to be assigned to a cruiser or to an officer?
Chief Adams.
Good evening. And the city manager summed it up nicely, but the way we do it now, we currently have 9 rifles, and they're assigned to specific officers, because you have to cite each rifle based on a bunch of different variables, and that takes a few hours out at the range. So by getting the 9 additional, we'll be able to have more or less officers assigned to the rifles, which will then allow more rifles out on the street at the same time. Obviously, this is part of our emergency preparedness, which is in our strategic planning. If you remember, we purchased the ballistic helmets, the ballistic vests for active shooter scenarios. Like the city manager said, hopefully we never, ever have to use these, but as a police department, we have to be ready to respond to a critical incident like an active shooter and make sure that our officers are trained and equipped for such an incident.
Are these in the vehicles now?
Yes, we have 9, so the officers who are assigned bring them out on every shift.
Any other
So
questions?
they're stored in the armory, and then the officer will take them out in the cruiser on their shift.
I was parked out there the other day and saw them come out. They all had their rifles
Yes.
into the cruiser.
Is this all this grant is for?
Our portion is solely for the purchase of these rifles.
That's what the grant is assigned for?
Yes.
Rifles, not anything else?
The rifles, and then the Belknap County, like the city manager said, has, I think, $3,000, which will go towards the purchase of, I believe, 2 radar units. So ours was solely for the rifles. When we authored the grant, it was specific for the rifles and the radar units for the sheriff's department.
Any other questions? Thank you, Chief. Okay, first order of business here on this item would be to suspend the rules that require us to read the entire resolution. So a motion would be in order to waive the reading of this resolution relative to Justice Assistant Grant, to waive the resolution, reading the resolution in its entirety and have it read by title only. Could I have that motion, please? Counselor Bolduc? Seconded by Counselor Doyle. Any discussion of waiving the reading of the resolution? All those in favor of waiving the reading, please raise a hand. We have 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion carries. Next up, a motion would be in order to move a first reading of a resolution relative to authorizing the city manager to accept a justice assistance grant in the amount of $14,641, with the city's share at $11,641, and requests that a public hearing be scheduled for September 28, 2015, during the regular council meeting relative to the acceptance of this grant. Moved by Councilor Bolduc, seconded by Councilor Doyle. Any discussion of adopting this motion? All those in favor, please raise a hand.
Aye.
We have 5 votes in the affirmative, and the motion carries. Item number 4 under new business is a request to schedule 2 public hearings on September 28th, 2015, during the regular council meeting. First hearing would be a proposed application to the Community Development Finance Authority for up to $12,000 in Community Development Block Grant Planning Study Funds for Granite State Children's Alliance to develop a comprehensive plan to create a model child advocacy center, the Greater Lakes Child Advocacy Center at 95 Water Street in Laconia. The majority of the clients of that agency are low and moderate income. And then secondly, to hold a public hearing on the Residential Anti-Displacement and Relocation Assistance Plan. I think we have some experience in the recent past in terms of why that second one is necessary under federal law. Is there any questions or discussions of this item before we get a motion on the floor? Okay, a motion would be in order to schedule a public hearing on September 28, 2015, during the regular council meeting regarding a proposed application to the Community Development Finance Authority for up to $12,000 in Community Development Block Grant Planning Study Funds for Granite State Children's Alliance to develop a comprehensive plan to create a model child advocacy center, the Greater Lakes Child Advocacy Center at 95 Water Street, Laconia, New Hampshire. Moved by Councilor Bolduc. Is there a second? Second by Councilor Doyle. Any discussion of this motion? All those in favor of adoption, please raise a hand. We have 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion carries. Secondly, a motion would be in order to move to schedule a public hearing on September 28, 2015, during the regular council meeting regarding the residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan. Moved by Councilor Bolduc, seconded by Councilor Doyle. Any discussion of scheduling that public hearing? All those in favor, please raise a hand. We have 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion also carries. New business item number 6 is a request to restore Lot 67 on Maiden Lady Cove Lane. This would have been a good quiz for somebody tonight to identify where Maiden Lady Cove Lane is.
I know where it
And
is.
and I only know because I cheated. And for those who don't know, it is in the far northwest corner of the city
Yep.
on Lake Winnipesaukee, shoreline property in the far northwest point of the city. If you picture yourself driving north on Scenic Road where it turns left sharply onto Watson Road, if you were to go straight ahead at that intersection, you would run into this road.
And I think there used to be a second beach there. I think that was the name of it, Second Beach. Yeah.
You know how to get there.
You have to go through Needle to get there.
I know how to get there.
Okay, before we open the floor to questions and comments, I'll recognize the city manager for his report on this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in your background information for this item, you have the request from the property owner, William Davison, who I believe is in attendance here tonight. So if I butcher something up, I'm sure he'll jump in and help me out here. We also have Chapter 674 of the state RSAs, which talks about the subdivision of land. So if you look, I'm going to turn your attention to the map on the back page of the RSA. And I know the council has done a few of these involuntary lot mergers where similar ownership as cities and towns across the state were trying to tighten up, you will, their tax billing process and their tax maps and their records. There were a lot of small postage stamp slots in most cases that were combined just for ease of record keeping. So that is the case here, and I know we've dealt with probably 4 or 5 of these over the past year and a half. So if you look at the map, you'll see lots 4, 5, and 6. So 5, as my understanding was, the original lot owned by the applicant, or the requestor, I guess I should say. A house was built on that lot in 1955. And subsequent to that, lots 4 and 6 were purchased, and then at some point after that, the 3 lots were combined in one for city records and tax purposes. So the criteria that we look at as a city is, has the property owner of the merged lots benefited by having the lots merged? And by benefit, I mean, did they utilize side setbacks or rear setbacks or frontage or something in order to construct some kind of a dwelling or some kind of a structure that they would not have been able to do if they did not have the other land to go with that. If the answer to that is yes, then we need to look into it a little bit more, and maybe the recommendation is they utilize the benefit of the combined lots, and therefore we shouldn't. It has no bearing on whether the lots were conforming at the time this happened. All we can look at is, did they utilize the combined lots to a benefit after the fact? So you can see the house is pretty close to the property line, but that's where the property line between 5 and 6 existed back in the day. In reviewing this, we look at it with the city attorney, the assessing office looks at it, planning department does comment as well. In this case, because the lots are relatively small, they do sit on the waterfront. There's a number of components that come into it. One piece of information that was brought to our attention by Mr. Davison subsequent to this memo being drafted is that they are not on septic, they are on city sewer, as well as the lots 4 and 6 are also stubbed, so if anything were ever to be built there, there is sewer available as well. The only reason I bring that up is because you saw in Shanna's memo that potentially a septic system may have been partially on Lot 4 or Lot 6, and maybe they want to put some sort of easement or something to that. But we've learned that that's not the case. Even if there was septic there, that still is an internal private matter. So staff recommendation is that there was no utilization of these lots being combined for the purpose of building structures, and we would recommend that you restore them, as the requester has asked, back to their original status. Also in the memo, you will know that there are just kind of FYI items that, they may be non-conforming lots, they may need variances from city and the State Department of Environmental Services going forward. There's no guarantee that these lots necessarily are guaranteed to be buildable lots in the future. But even if we're restoring lots and they're non-conforming, that's fine because that's how they were prior to. So we just wanted to kind of put a complete record to it, but from the city's perspective, we do not have any objection to these lots being restored to their original status.
That's in the shorefront residential zone?
I'm looking for that in the memo, and I want to say, yes. Shoreline Overlay District. So not shorefront residential, 50-foot no-build area along the water according to the Shoreline Overlay Zoning District.
And the applicant is aware that under current zoning regulations, the two new created lots that currently don't have houses on them would be non-conforming lots.
Correct. We provided a copy of that document to the applicant last week.
Okay, any questions or comments before we get a motion on the floor? Okay, a motion would be in order to restore Lot 67 on Maiden Lady Cove Lane to its pre-merger status as requested by William Davidson. Moved by Counselor Bolduc.
Go ahead.
Counselor Bolduc made the motion.
Second.
Seconded by Counselor Bear. Any discussion of the motion? All those in favor, please raise a hand. Voted 5 votes in the affirmative, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming tonight. Okay, that concludes our new business agenda for the night.
I believe you have one more,
Six.
Mr. Mayor.
Whoops, I'm sorry, 6. Does not conclude our new business. Last item is a request to appoint a council representative to the Deborah B&R's Award Committee. My understanding is that Counselor Doyle has agreed to serve on that committee again, so a motion would be in order to have the council appoint Counselor Doyle as the council's representative to the 2015 Deborah B&R's Award Committee.
So moved.
Moved by Counselor
I'll second it.
Bounds.
Jumped right on that, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Caught me off guard there. Thank you, Counselor Bounds. Seconded by Counselor Bolduc. Any discussion of that motion? All those in favor of appointing Counselor Doyle, please raise a hand. Vote is 5 affirmative votes, and that motion carries. Thank you. So that does conclude our new business. We have no unfinished business to take up tonight, so we get to nominations, appointments, and elections, and we have several different boards tonight. The first one is the Heritage Commission, where we have one alternative position available. We had 2 applicants that were interviewed within the last month, Jane Whitehead and Judy Smith. So to review the procedure that we used last time, because we are making appointments, in a minute it will be germane for a counselor to move to appoint either one of these 2 people to that 3-year term. If that motion is seconded, we will have a vote on making that appointment. If a majority of the council votes in favor, that appointment will be made and that will close the subject. If there are not a majority of votes available at that time for that applicant, we'll move on, and it would be appropriate for a motion if a counselor makes it to approve to nominate the other person, and we would repeat the procedure. So we will not vote on both names unless the first name that comes up for election is not approved by a majority of the council, 3 votes. Question by Councilor Barron, or do you have them ready to make a motion?
Yeah, I was going to nominate Jane Whitehead to a 3-year position on the Heritage Commission.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Councilor Bear and seconded by Councilor Hamel. Yes. To appoint Jane Whitehead to a 3-year term as an alternate on the Heritage Commission. Any discussion of that motion? Okay, all those in favor of appointing Jane Whitehead, please raise a hand.
Aye.
We have 5 votes in the affirmative. and that appointment has been made. We thank both of those applicants for stepping forward and offering their services to the Heritage Commission. And we move on to the Personnel Advisory Board. We have 2 regular positions available. Our applicant that was interviewed is Joan LaRue. A motion would be in order to appoint Joan LaRue to a 3-year term on the Personnel Advisory Board expiring at the end of October 2018. Moved by Counselor Bolduc. Is there a second? Counselor Doyle seconds that motion. Any discussion? All those in favor of appointing Joan LaRue to the Personnel Advisory Board, please raise a hand. 5 votes in the affirmative, and that motion is carried and the appointment is made. Finally, to the Weirs TIF District Advisory Board, we have 1 applicant for one of the 3 regular positions available. That was Joseph H. Driscoll III. A motion would be in order to appoint Mr. Driscoll to a 2-year term expiring at the end of June 2017. Counselor Bullock, seconded by Counselor Doyle. Any discussion of that appointment? All those in favor of appointing Mr. Driscoll to a 2-year term on the Weirs TIF District Advisory Board, please raise the hand. Vote is 5 affirmative votes, and that appointment is also confirmed. One final piece of business on the Planning Board. At a previous meeting, we appointed Mr. Warren Hutchins to a new 3-year term on the Planning Board, with that term expiring at the end of June 2018. Mr. Hutchins, because of pressing family business, I believe there is a memorandum from him in your packet, was not able to take the oath of office within the required 10-day period, so that nomination election has been voided, and we need to do it again. So a motion would be in order to appoint Mr. Hutchins to a 3-year term on the Planning Board.
So moved.
By Counselor Doyle, seconded by
Me.
Counselor Bolduc. Any discussion of that appointment? All those in favor of appointing Mr. Hutchins to a 3-year term on the Planning Board, please raise a hand.
Right.
All opposed, please raise a hand. We have 3 affirmative votes, 2 negative votes. The motion carries 3-2, and the nomination is confirmed. Thank you.
Same old, same old.
Council comments. Any council comments tonight? No?
Do we officially taken her name off the to-do list? Susan Hayes?
Susan Hayes, yes, I think we,
Okay,
I think by consensus, we made it
all right.
appropriate. We would not reschedule another interview there.
There is, so, I guess my question is now that I had raised the issue of waiving the rules for Mr. Peltonovich with respect to his appointment as a library trustee and to the Conservation Commission, and appointing him tonight. And I guess I want to know what the sense of people is in terms of waiving that requirement, that we wait an additional 2 weeks.
May I weigh in on that?
Sure.
I'm not anticipating any issue, but I think that in all but the rarest of circumstances, meaning there's a crisis on a particular board where they need an extra member because they can't get a quorum together or something like that, that there are good reasons to follow the rule that we have. And the first one that comes to mind, especially in a case like this, where none of us knows the particular applicant, that it gives the fact that he has applied, he or she has applied and whatnot, a couple of weeks for some vetting possibility in terms of if someone came forward about an applicant, especially somebody we didn't know or something or other, that would be a possibility for new information to be introduced to the council that we're not aware of on the night of the application. I think if it was Mr. Selig or someone like that that we all know very well, that might be different. But in the case of someone we don't know, it might be prudent to wait 2 weeks.
Well, I'm going to follow your advice on this, Mr. Mayor.
Wow. Let that be noted for the record.
When does that happen?
Okay, any other business to come before the council tonight? Motion to adjourn would be in order. Counselor Bolduc, seconded by Counselor Bear.
Yes.
Yes, enthusiastically seconded by Counselor Bear. All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.